Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipson. Welcome to episode 140 of Sports Management Podcast. Today's guest is Brad Ross, the VP of Global Sports and Entertainment Marketing and Partnerships at the Coca-Cola Company. Brad started at Coca-Cola in 2007. He moved to Google for 2 years between 2019 and 21, and then boomeranged back to Coca-Cola. He's born and raised in South Africa, but is currently living in Atlanta, where Coca-Cola has its global headquarters. Sport has always been a fundamental part of his life and shaped many fundamental memories for him growing up. In this episode, we spoke about why marketing is a team sport, Coca-Cola's 100-year partnership with IOC, their new partnership with the International Cricket Council ICC, how Brad and his team are preparing for Paris 24, FIFA World Cup 2026, LA 28, and many more events simultaneously, how his upbringing in South Africa shaped him, Africa as a sport continent on the rise, Brad's memories from FIFA World Cup 2010 in South Africa, and much more. Brad Ross, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thanks, Marcus. It's great to be here and be part of the conversation.
I'm very excited for this. So kicking it off right away, why is marketing a team sport?
You know, I think marketing is one of those functions where you just simply can't do it on your own. One, there's so many different elements that you have to take into account. Two, there are elements outside of marketing that you also have to take into account. And so the 1 + 1 = 3 saying is very, very true when it comes to marketing. And you know, I've just always been a believer that you can't do it on your own. It certainly is a team sport, and you need a group of individuals that kind of have the same vision and ambition as you do to try and make things happen. And you know, the better the team, the better the outcome versus just one or two individuals.
For sure. So you're currently the VP of Global Sports and Entertainment Marketing and Partnership at the Coca-Cola Company. So what does this role entail?
It's a cool title, right? But and it's pretty glamorous, but it comes with a lot too. So I really look after our team and a team of experts, to be honest, that work in the space of sports and entertainment. And why is that important to the Coca-Cola Company? Is we want to connect with our consumers through things they care about. And a lot of the things they care about are sports and entertainment. So what my team and I do is we focus on, you know, pulling together some of the most compelling sponsorship partnerships that we can, as well as building some great experiences through passion points across the board of things that people care about. So, you know, whether you think about football or cricket, which we'll talk about, which has been a recent kind of announcement from our end, or we talk about music or gaming or fashion, or just being in the zeitgeist of culture, that's really where the work that our team does is to try and make sure we're connecting in things that are both relevant and passionate for our fans and for our consumers.
Interesting. So how do you build up to this passion? Because now if you think about Coca-Cola, the World Cup, the Olympics, even Christmas, sometimes you associate with your brand. So how is it possible to create this strong brand identity that you associate with these huge events?
Yeah, I think we stand on the shoulders of giants that have come before us, to be honest, Marcus. I think that, you know, as a brand that is over 135 years old, we've had some past successes that continue to be relevant in today's world through the notion of the fact that consumers, you know, we want to be where they are. We want to be in places that they care about. And so there's examples that you've given, you know, in the sports world, in the FIFA World Cup world, you know, being part of FIFA for almost 50 years, being part of the Olympics for almost 100 years, and being part of Christmas for the longest time ever, right? Almost bringing the iconic red color to what we know today as Santa. Things that I think that the brand has done over a number of years. And we're just fortunate to be stewards of the brand through this period of time that we work on the brand to hopefully continue to build the legacy and using another sports analogy, leave the jersey in a better place than we found it. And so our job is twofold. On the one hand is to continue the legacy and the work of the past, and to make sure that we do justice to what folks have done that have come before us, while equally making sure we connect with a new generation right now, with Gen Z, and making sure that what we do is both relevant and meaningful for them and what they like in their lives today. So I think it's both. It's respecting the past and using the past, the legacy, but also looking to the future and making sure that we continue to be as relevant as we can be.
Looking into the future, the closest thing I think we have is the Olympics in Paris now later this year. With regards to that, in your role at the Coca-Cola Company, how are you working now in the build-up to this event?
Yeah, I think, Marcus, everyone thinks that, you only really start planning a year ahead or 6 months ahead, and it can't be further from the truth. I think, if anything, in 100 years, almost 100 years, in LA 28, we will be 100-year partners with the IOC. If anything, that long-term relationship has taught us is that you have to prepare for mega events of this nature on two areas and on two spectrums. On the one hand, working very closely with our host country, in this case, Coca-Cola France and the team in France, and starting to build out, what the plan is to activate this event on the ground. So that's one part of the puzzle. The other part of the puzzle is then using the opportunity and the rights and the IP that come with being partners with the IOC or the Paralympics and the IPC, and using that to really build brand communication and build the right compelling campaigns around the world. Because even though the Olympics are happening in one country, we have over 200 markets around the world that we build compelling content and campaigns for. And so it's been a journey. We really start our preparations in the host country 4 to 5 years before the actual event comes along. We start in the host country by making sure we set up the right project team, we build the right legacies and the vision for what we're trying to achieve, and then we work backwards from there, build a critical path, and start to work out what needs to happen and when it needs to happen, so that when the games roll around, we're as ready as can be, while remaining flexible and making sure that we take advantage of any opportunity that presents itself closer to the time. But I think having that planning in place and that mantra of planning sets a really strong foundation to be ready for a mega sporting event like the Olympics or the Paralympics, which are both huge in their opportunity, but equally complex in how you execute them. And then also, as I mentioned, on the flip side, we start working on our campaign work also a couple of years out, where we look at which brands we want to associate with the event. And in this case, we have a couple of our core brands that are actually going to leverage and use the Olympics. And you'll see that coming live in a couple of weeks. And then also at a portfolio level, how we want to communicate in store with our key customers, etc. So it's a fairly lengthy planning process, but it's one that, through the years, we've continued to strengthen and sharpen. And while we're never perfect and we always continue to look for improvements, we definitely know that it takes time and the right level of investment and the right level of diligence up front to truly execute and activate games of this nature and to maximize the rights that we have on offer from our rights holder, in this case, the IOC or the IPC.
So you mentioned that there is a lot of potential, obviously, with this big event. So what are the goals for Coca-Cola with regards to Paris 2024, so that when you evaluate the event afterwards, that you felt like you succeeded?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of things that we look at when we think about what we want to achieve. Primarily, the first one is we always think about what are we wanting to do with our consumers. And so how do we leverage the rights that we acquire through a partnership with the IOC or the IPC and make sure that we're able to bring that to life through our various promotions, campaigns, in-store, etc. And then also offering experiences to consumers around the world to come in and be part of it and enjoy it. So on the one hand, I would say, we really think about our consumers and we've been consumer-centric at the heart. The second element is about our customers. As a business, we sell products to our customers who really then engage with our consumers. So whether they're top-end grocery stores or mom-and-pop store or any of the channels that we operate within, part of our objective is to see how we use these rights to activate the trade and to make sure that our customers also have an opportunity to bring this to life through the rights that we've acquired as a company. And so the customer lens is equally important. And then I would also say it's about driving, company reputation. the IOC values and the values of the Coca-Cola Company are synonymous and very close to each other's. Unity, upliftment, those kind of things that we have shared goals. And so we use the opportunity as a force for good and to try and drive a force for good out there. And so we look at it through three lenses. It's not just one way or didactically consumer only. They form the heart of it. But then how we look and work with our customers and also how we drive company reputation, I'd say are the three core elements within that. And then, of course, we double click into each of them as we look at the host country. We look at specific things that we're trying to achieve across, share value, across what we're trying to do with acquiring new customers or driving additional SOV. All those kind of things come into account when you double click on any of these things that we've looked at.
Coke operates in 207 countries, I think, in the world.
Correct.
And you mentioned that you have a team in France, Coca-Cola in France. How much does it help to have staff on ground when you have this type of event?
I think it's vital, Marcus. I think, as we're a company that operates globally, it has to be locally relevant. And so we're very fortunate in the way that our system is set up, that we do have the global infrastructure, but we're very connected on a local level to the market and the folks and the communities that we operate within. And so having a team in France, a very experienced team that have also been around some of these global events, either people in France that have activated UEFA Euro in 2016, for example, that understand the complexity of bringing these events to life, but also understand the upside and the opportunity and can see the big picture is just wonderful to have. And then to give the opportunity to our teams on the ground to be part of this, right? To be part of the Olympic torch relay, which in less than 70 days now is going to start, where the Olympic torch will go right around the country of France, and being able to give our teams on the ground the opportunity to be part of that, to carry the flame, is just incredible. But the amount of hard work and effort that goes in from our teams on the ground is also world-class. They get on board early on in the project. They're part of the team and part of the infrastructure that it takes to get this done. And, as a global company and as a global brand, we could not function or do what we do without our teams on the ground, who are really the ones doing the heavy lifting, really the ones engaging with the consumers on the ground, the customers, and the various stakeholders, and really the ones that are actually doing the work to make this all come to life. So to answer your question shortly, we couldn't do it without our local teams. And they also bring a relevance to the picture, right? As much as at a global level, we look at insights, we look and see what's happening, the real reality comes down to what's happening on the ground. And no one better to translate those insights than the team in Paris and in France, who are there every day, living in it, understanding the cultural zeitgeist of the country at that given point in time, and are able to help us build the plans and make the plans stronger because of what they do on the ground. And so I think it's definitely a mutualistic type of approach between the two.
And what an experience for these people on the ground, as you mentioned, an Olympic experience that might come only once in a lifetime.
Exactly. I grew up in South Africa, and I had my first chance to be part of a global sports event, much like the Olympics, when the 2010 FIFA World Cup came to South Africa. And at the time, I was the local guy on the ground, trying to work with the global team at the time, let them get an understanding of what some of the local insights were, to understand what it meant to be like living in South Africa at the time. And, for the first ever FIFA World Cup to not only come to South Africa, but to come to Africa. And so I felt, both a huge privilege and responsibility at the time from a local perspective, trying to influence and shape the global agenda. And that continues. So when we work with our teams on the ground, they feel the same. It's that possibly once in a lifetime opportunity to be part of a huge event like the Olympics or the FIFA World Cup, working on a brand like Coca-Cola or any of our brands in your own country is kind of like a trifecta that is just incredible.
Definitely. So since you brought up 2010, there was some cynicism around that event beforehand, and it really was a super amazing, successful event in the end. So how was the experience for you working on site, as you just mentioned?
Yeah, I must say it was a little frustrating from time to time hearing about Plan B. I think from when FIFA awarded the FIFA World Cup to South Africa till basically as the FIFA World Cup was about to kick off, this plan B kept being mentioned. Will South Africa be able to pull it off? Does South Africa have the infrastructure to deliver an event of this nature? Does South Africa have the expertise on the ground to do it? And being part of the team on the ground, we always knew we did. It wasn't a false optimism that we had. We knew what we were capable of. We hosted the Rugby World Cup in 1995, and that was a huge success. And since then, hosted a number of major sporting events. And so to hear this plan B was on the one hand frustrating, but on the other hand, actually drove us even more to make sure we could prove the world wrong, or those around the world that doubted the ability, and also make it truly an African FIFA World Cup. And that's what it was. I think those visitors that came to the country thoroughly enjoyed it. I think the way that the tournament was broadcast on TV or other platforms came across. And, to date, you hear that it was one of the best FIFA World Cups in history. And so I think being part of the team planning for it was both interesting when we heard about Plan B, but at the same time gave us that additional drive and edge to make sure we could deliver this FIFA World Cup in a way that we knew was going to put the country and the continent on the map for a long time to come. And I'm so glad that we proved everyone that thought we couldn't do it wrong and those that knew we could right, because it truly was an amazing experience to be part of. And to welcome the world, to South Africa and to Africa as a whole was just an incredible milestone, I think, for the country and the continent.
I'm sure. And also, I assume that this was something extra special for you. You're born in South Africa, you speak Afrikaans, you have lived there for a couple of years. So that must be even more special for you.
It's very special. I think, as I mentioned a little earlier, having the chance to work on a global sports event of this nature in your own country is something that not everyone gets to experience in their lifetime. And so for those of us that have the opportunity, no matter where the events are, but to be part of something like this, where truly you put your best foot forward as a country, you open your arms and you welcome the world, and you show them a little insight into your culture, into your country, into your teams that are around you, and your people in the country is always an amazing opportunity. And it still is one of the most special personal and professional experiences of my career to have been part of something as special as the FIFA World Cup in my own country in 2010.
I'm sure. So looking at Africa as the continent and with regards to sports, how do you see the potential for sport industry to grow in Africa?
Look, I think Africa got huge potential on multiple levels. I think if 2010 was anything to show, you could see that, the potential is there to organize and operate professional events at the highest level. We've done that in the cricket space. We've done that in the rugby space. We've done that in the netball space, in the hockey space. So a number of sporting codes that have come to the country have been hosted beautifully and have seen what the country and the continent has to offer. The raw talent in Africa too is second to none across multiple sporting codes. You just look at the rugby and you see, currently South Africa are the Rugby World Cup champions, second time in a row and 4 times in total. So the talent and the infrastructure and the thought where is there in terms of growing the sport. When you think about other sports like football, the raw talent in the continent is incredible. Morocco surprising so many folks around the world by getting into the semi-final in the last FIFA World Cup. Just watching the last AFCON and seeing the quality of football and the quality of the players and how that gap seems to be closing around the rest of the world is incredible. So, if we put the right infrastructure in place and the right development structures in place, I don't doubt that Africa can be and continue to be a force to be reckoned with on multiple sporting codes, as the continent continues to grow, as more investment comes into the continent on the sport side. And as you see some of the sporting federations and codes continue to become more professional in today's world, in today's era. So I don't doubt for one second that the continent has got so much potential and so much raw talent. It's just about unlocking it and unleashing it now, which I think is the next step. And as I said, we've already started to see that in certain areas and in certain cases. Marcus, I lived in Nigeria for a while, and I would love watching the kids just playing football all over the place. And again, the skills, the passion, the drive is unbelievable, and you think about it rivaling some of the best football nations in the world, the Brazils of the world, or even some of the European teams. It's just fantastic to see that is there. So I think it's just really about connecting the dots now and really building the right development structures in place and infrastructure. And we're seeing it. There's an incredible foundation called the Right to Dream Foundation based out of Ghana. And they've just established another foundation up in Egypt. And you see the talent that comes through that foundation, the thinking that goes into it, and what they're doing is incredible. And now they're actually moving over to the US and have just started something out here in San Diego. And so you see pockets of brilliance emerging. And the more of that we see, I think the broader scale and the broader base, you're going to see the success of sports on the continent.
That's really exciting. Bouncing back to US, we have also the FIFA World Cup in 2026 coming up, hosted in North America. So again, you don't plan this event only a year ahead. We already established that. So now when we are 2 years so ahead, how's the process going? Are you in the middle? What's happening now?
Yeah, it's exciting times for sure, right? Having it in Mexico, the US, and Canada, 3 countries, is going to be phenomenal. Secondly, the tournament itself has gotten larger, right? So going from 32 teams to 48 teams, which in essence means going from 64 games to 104 games, 16 host cities across 3 different countries. The scale is unlike anything else. The FIFA World Cup in 2026 will be the single biggest sporting event in history. And so we have to obviously prepare for this, right? And prepare for it as much as we can. And so, right now we're recruiting and are continuing to recruit our teams that are going to be working on the project. We've already developed what our legacies are, so really what we want to leave behind coming out of the FIFA World Cup. We're starting to align the business needs between our teams in Mexico, in the US, and in Canada. And while they are slightly different or nuanced in certain areas, there's also a lot of similarities. So we're trying to make sure we're very key on that. We've started the marketing campaign work, on the insights side, working on, what this is going to come together and manifest as. But we're incredibly excited just based on the size of the prize and the opportunity ahead. Football in Mexico is the number 1 sport by a landslide. It's a well-established cultural phenomenon in that country. But we're seeing in the US that football is, or soccer as it's called in the US, it's the youngest sport. It's the most multicultural sport. And it's the sport that probably has the biggest upside in terms of growth potential. So you start to see just the opportunity that comes with it. And then likewise in Canada, the same thing applies. You see the youth of the Canadians getting behind it. You see the multicultural versatility of the sport emerging in that country too. And you start to see let's say a very well-established and sophisticated football market like Mexico is already up and running. And then you see the US and the Canada with the upside and the potential for growth there being second to none. And you have a very interesting recipe for what 2026 could look like. President Infantino has been quite bullish in how he's looked at it, to say he'd love to see soccer or football be the number 1 sport in the country in a couple of years. And while there's a long way to go when you consider NFL or American football and baseball and hockey, you can see that soccer, through the strength of the MLS, through the appetite that's been created, through the growth of the women's game, is definitely on a trajectory for big things to come. And so I think it's going to be very exciting to see it play out. We've already started to see with the announcement of the match schedule, where the host cities are, where the finals and the semifinals and the opening games are going to be hosted, that I think the 3 countries are gearing up and getting ready for an incredible party in 2026.
I'm sure, and I can't wait to be a part of it and watch it. So we have talked about Paris 2024, FIFA World Cup 2026, LA 28, you have the 100-year partnership with IOC, all of this thing going on simultaneously. So how do you work and, being able to separate and work on all of this simultaneously?
Yeah, it all comes down to the team, Marcus. I think it was great that you asked that question right up front, that marketing is a team sport and sports marketing is a team sport times two. What I'm very fortunate to have is to have an exceptional team that really understand the nature and the dynamics of working in the sports environment. I have people on the team that have worked for the MLS, that have worked for UEFA, that have worked for FIFA, that have worked for the IOC on the team, and they understand the complexity of putting these events together. They understand the opportunities and the upside that comes with it, and they understand what it takes to prepare for and be ready for an event of this nature. A very high-performing team with great experience and great understanding of the environment. And I think that is what success is all about. And so whether we're looking now, moving into full-on execution mode for Paris, or we're in the planning stages of both Milan Cortina, which is the next Winter Olympics in 2026, or the FIFA World Cup in 2026, where we're also, we're past the planning stage and we're into the get-going stage. And then also the LA 28 Olympics, which are around the corner too. We're in the early stages of planning there. And so you've got something that you're executing. You've got something that you've, already kicked off the planning and starting to move ahead on. And then you've got something that you're in the pre-planning phase on. And so you have to be able to balance the short term and the long term. I think that's a key requisite. I think you have to prioritize and understand what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. I think the project planning is incredibly important. And, we use a system of master planning where we try and put, the right critical paths in place across all the events that are either happening sequentially or simultaneously in the case of 2026, when we'll both have the Winter Olympics and FIFA World Cup. And then how we balance out that workload and continue to work with our internal teams in the host countries, as well as with our rights holders, whether they are FIFA or the IOC, to make sure that we're able to pull this off. But I did mention also that we announced a global partnership with the ICC in December. And so it's exciting to be working with the ICC too. And this year, we're going to be having the T20 World Cup happening in the USA. Who would have thought cricket in the USA, as well as the Caribbean, where obviously cricket is a religion in the Caribbean, but it's still a very, young developing sport in the USA. And so just as we've spoken about on the football or / soccer side, cricket is even more in its infancy here in the US, but it's exciting to be planning for these big events that are going to be coming here later this year on the US side, and then on the Caribbean side, where some of those markets and those countries are super excited to welcome it. So it's multiple sports events that we're having to manage, some that we have a long-standing association with and some that are fairly new. But it's exciting to be in the sports space because we know that it means a lot to our consumers. People care about it. And it's exciting to be able to be part of it and to bring it to life.
I'm sure. So the ICC International Cricket Council global partnership for the next 8 years.
Correct.
We talked about IOC being 100 years partnership. So what is the ideal lifespan of a partnership, or is there such thing?
It's a great question because you may have some schools of thought and saying, the longer you put a contract together, yes, the more efficiencies and probably long-term gains you can get out of it, but you don't know what the world's going to look like in 5 years, 6 years, both on the technology side, on where the game is going. So there's always an inherent risk in signing a long-term contract. On the flip side, signing a 1-year or 2-year contract gives you a little bit more flexibility in the near term, but does it give you that long-term partnership that you're looking for too? And so I don't know what the right answer is, honestly, Marcus. I think it's about feeling it out and also understanding the vision of the rights holder. In this case, we're very, I'd say, bullish on where cricket as a sport is going. And the ICC as a governing body, they're visionary in how they want to continue to transform the game. A great group of individuals working over there at the ICC. And so I think that comes into account when you think about signing a contract of this nature and of this duration, is to look at it on paper and understand where the trajectory is going and to see if you're ready to make an educated guess on that. And at the same time, trying to understand what the value alignment is between the two organizations and the two companies. and seeing if there's something more that goes beyond just the contract or the paper. And I think in this case with the ICC, we feel very confident in terms of their ability to grow the game and strengthen the game and their vision for the game going forward. And so an 8-year deal, while we don't know what the technology landscape or the format of the game landscape may look like in 8 years' time, we believe that if we get together and we work together in true partnership, we'll be able to build the right collaboration for the benefit of the game and for the benefit of the fans.
That's a really good point. Maybe the answer is it depends.
Depends, exactly. Depends.
So I want to go back until when you grew up in South Africa and going to sporting events with your father. How did the interest for sports in general grow, and how was it to grow up in South Africa at this time?
Yeah, Marcus, I grew up in apartheid. And so we were under international sanctions for a large majority of my youth, right? So the first global event that came to the country that I can remember was the Rugby World Cup in 1995. And if you watched, or any of your listeners have watched the movie called Invictus, it will give you a real sense of what was going on at the time in the country. We had just become a democracy in 1994. President Mandela had just taken over as the first democratically elected president. And, I think he had a vision and an understanding of what sport could do for a country. And that manifested itself in the 1995 Rugby World Cup, which for me was one of the earliest experiences of watching a sport and how it could galvanize a nation. A very, at the time, fragmented nation that, had just become a democracy. And so to see the power of the Rugby World Cup in 1995, to see the power of the Springboks and what they did for the country then is significant, because they've continued to carry that mantle since then to even as recently as last year, where the Springboks won in Paris, the Rugby World Cup. And so I think sport from my early days was foundational, and it showed that it's larger than the sum of its parts, and that the power of sport to galvanize and bring people together is second to none. And so, very early on, I knew at some point, while I was an active sportsman, I'd love to stay in the sports space and work in the sports space in some shape or form. And so if I go right back to a young me, to my teenage years, I didn't quite know where this would land up or where it would manifest, but being able to have remained in the sports space, to be working in sports, knowing what the potential of sports is, to uplift countries, to bring people together, and to uplift the individuals is just incredible. And it's something that I'm very grateful for, having had that experience to witness firsthand as a very young boy in my home country, to now being part of the beauty of sport and what it can be.
Yeah. So I know you're a swimmer, but what other sports have you been doing?
Yeah, so I was always a competitive swimmer, and I did play football growing up. Really enjoyed that. And so I'd probably say those are my two kind of main sports, but tried my hand in a lot of different sports growing up. Water polo, which is one that's very closely linked to swimming, played that, and I still recently play water polo. So definitely a water baby by nature, but also love the team sports like water polo and football. And then also played a bit of cricket. I was never very good at cricket, but really enjoyed the game. And just this last weekend, we were at Lord's, which is the home of cricket in England, in London, and getting the opportunity to have a guided tour around Lord's and to see the tradition of cricket and some of the earliest upbringings of cricket was just pretty incredible.
That's fascinating. Taking with you your upbringing during these uncertain times, and when sports was important part, and you saw what sport can give to a person in terms of, being a team and all the health benefits, but also all the things that comes around the soft values. Now in your current role, how do you feel like your background has shaped you into being a better sports marketer?
Yeah, I think there's so many parallels you can draw from playing sports or being involved in sports to the business world and what happens in the business world. On the personal side, I would say, sports teaches you discipline. As a swimmer, getting up very early in the morning, going to training, having to do dry land workouts in the afternoon, training again a second time of the day. That takes discipline. And that discipline, it comes, it's habitual, you learn it. So I think that I've been able to take and apply. And that's maybe from more of an individual sport like swimming, but being able to apply it to today's world. When I played football and, water polo, and it was a team sport, you knew that you had to show up every day. And, your role was to try and improve and make the team better by your contributions, but also understanding that the chemistry of the team was as important as the talent within the team. And that's something that I've pulled through and made sure that, whether I'm part of a team or leading a team, really making sure that that culture fit, the chemistry, and how that team operates together is the most important thing. You can put 11 incredible football players on a pitch, and they could be the best players in the world in their positions, but it just might not click. And they may take on a mediocre team and lose. And it's not because of lack of individual talent, but it's about applying that talent collectively. And I think that's what it's like in today's world, is bringing the right people on board. But the definition of the right people goes beyond just their skill set. It goes into who they are, what drives them, what motivates them, and how they play together. And that for me is something that I saw very early on as a sportsman, and bringing it through to, to what we are today. My best example, I think, that I can give you of any book that looks at this is a book written called Legacy by James Kerr. And he writes about the All Blacks, which is arguably the Springboks' greatest rivalry in the world. But the book starts by saying the All Blacks are arguably the best sporting team in history based on their win ratio when compared to all other teams around the world. And he looks at 15 principles that drive the All Blacks as a team, and how those principles are then applied to real life today. And it's all about leaving a legacy. It's about leaving the jersey in a better place than you found it. And I think it's a phenomenal book, which gives you an insight into the culture of the All Blacks and how they think and how they operate. And nothing but respect for the All Blacks, and how they operate as a team and the values that they hold. And I think it's a great book for you and for your listeners to get when they can, because it really does draw some incredible parallels to being part of a high performance sports team, and how you apply those to the field of play in real life and what that looks like.
Thank you. That's a good book advice. And also you gave the Invicta and the movie as well.
So you got some homework.
Exactly. You have credited team efforts a lot during this talk, and you have been at Coca-Cola since 2007, except for 2 years at Google. So one doesn't stay in a company for that long if they are not feeling that they are in a good team and in a good atmosphere. So what would you say are some characteristics at Coca-Cola that makes it a good company to work in?
Yeah, I think, Marcus, I would say that one, the culture is important. I think you're not going to stay at a company for a long time unless you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself, and that the behaviors and the values of that company match your own. And so I've been very fortunate to have been part of, the Coca-Cola Company for, almost 15 years now, with a short sabbatical in between. But I think it is because of, the people. I think that Coke is a people first culture. There's a lot of empowerment. There's a feeling of empowerment. There's a feeling of teamwork, and that all resonates for me. Some companies are more individualistic in nature, and that works for other folks. So I think that's a big piece of it for me. I think that the values of also being empowered gives you the opportunity to think like an owner and act like an owner, and that's very empowering, especially in the space we operate in, is to be able to think like an owner in a sports entity within a CPG business. It is very interesting when you think about it. But our leaders understand the role that sports and entertainment play in the lives of our consumers. And they understand that it takes a certain skill set to be able to bring that to life and to make it manifest within our brand plans and our operations. And so they've been nothing but empowering and supportive in helping us build and define the vision. And that's a big combination that, I really appreciate as being part of the company with. And then also just, the Coca-Cola Company has been around for 137 plus years and still is able to maintain and build relevancy through things that matter. And so by being able to tap into the past while thinking about the future is a value or part of the culture that I think is just incredible, because you can learn from the past and understand how important it is, but not get pulled down by it either, while thinking 10, 20 years in the future and what the world could look like then, and how we have to bring that together. And I think balancing those two, the future forward and the backwards approach is something that I don't think all companies do either, which I also value. So culture and leadership, very, very important things, and two things that I really enjoy at the Coca-Cola Company.
That's great to hear. So some final questions before I will let you go here. Has there been any bumps on the road in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think anyone who says they've just had a plain sailing, maybe lying, or they haven't necessarily stepped outside their comfort zone. I think growth happens outside your comfort zone, and that's when you get into the spaces that are slightly unknown or that's not endemic to you. And so absolutely, there's been times where I've doubted myself or questioned myself. There've been, things that have happened, which you're like, looking back now, how did I let that happen? Or how could that have, taken shape? But that's where you learn. You learn from your mistakes, and you understand that your mistakes are what makes you stronger. But you also understand that to grow, you can't just continue to play it safe. You have to take some big swings, and not all your swings are going to win. You're not going to hit them all. And that's okay too. As long as you're understanding that you're in a learning mindset and you're trying to figure things out. And believe me when I say this, I'm going to continue to make mistakes. I'm going to continue to have a couple of bumps in my career as I move forward. And I wouldn't want it any other way. Because I think if you take the path more travel, that's easy to navigate, you're going to have a safe career and a safe journey. But I think the one where there are more bumps in the road and more things to navigate are probably the ones that are going to give you more of an upside. So absolutely, lots of bumps along the way, none that have taken me off course. And in fact, most of them have just been there to help grow me and mature me and make me a better person and a better businessman than perhaps if I hadn't had that opportunity and experience along the way.
On that topic, what would be your best advice for a young person who wants to pursue a career in sports?
I think you need to know why. I've always been a believer in following my passion, and that's always led me in the right direction. But I always knew the why. I knew what sports could do. I understood what sports meant to me as an individual and what it means to billions of people around the world. And so the why for me was pretty clear from the get-go. But any youngster that's getting into sport, don't just follow the lights. I think that's sometimes what happens is it's a sexy or glamorous job. You get to, either if you're working on the talent side with sportsmen and sportswomen, or on the rights holder side, working with some of the biggest events in the world, or, biggest sporting codes in the world, there's an illusion of grandeur that can come with it. And while it's cool, you need to make sure that when that fades, and it will, that you're still in it for the long term and why you're in it. And that for me is the thing that I would say to youngsters looking at getting into sports is why. Why do you want to get into sports, and what do you want to achieve? And once you've answered that, then you can really take the next steps in going forward. But, just jumping into sports because it sounds cool is probably not the answer that's going to give you a sustainable career in an environment that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's really good. Knowing your why.
Exactly.
Final question. Who from your network do you think would be a good guest on this podcast?
Oh, that's a good question, because I've got a few more, because I think there's folks that I can set you up with that work on our rights holder side. So there are one or two very interesting people at FIFA. There's interesting folks at UEFA as well as at the IOC. I think Special Olympics would be a very interesting one. The Special Olympics, which we're a founding member of, and I didn't speak a lot about, is an incredible organization that is very purpose-driven and very meaningful. When you see Special Olympics events come to life and you see the Special Olympic athletes get out there and perform, if you're not moved, I mean, it's just incredible to see some of these young Special Olympics athletes. And so if you're really looking for a purpose-driven type podcast, I would highly encourage someone from the Special Olympics team who I can definitely connect you with. If you're looking in the more, emerging space, gaming and esports and that, same thing. There's multiple folks. So we can definitely offline brainstorm, and happy to give you as many references as you need.
That's amazing. I would definitely take you up on that. Any final words before we sign off here? Something you want to end with?
No, well, one, it's been great chatting to you, Marcus. I think you can see that you're seasoned in this based on the type of questions you asked and the podcast that you've grown. So congratulations to you personally on that. I think that having the chance to have worked in sports is truly a blessing. It's like Spider-Man, what comes with great privilege comes with great responsibility. And you have to make sure that you're doing both. We're accountable at the end of the day to the bottom line and to our business results. And so we have to make sure that we continue to see how we leverage sport to drive the business as opposed to leverage the business to drive the sport. And that's the position that we're in on the sports side within a company that sponsors sports. But if you're on the other sides, if you're a rights holder listening to this, it's really to truly understand what you can bring to the table for your partners, whether they're sponsors or broadcasters, and the value that you can add to them to drive their own objectives. But ultimately, it's a very interesting space to be in, to be working in. I think that the next couple of years are going to be phenomenal. I think that what we did see during COVID was the premiumness of what live events offer, and specifically within that, the role that live sports play to connect us, to keep us grounded for our shared humanity. I think it's just such an amazing space to be in. And no matter what happens in the future, sports will always be around, right? They'll always be, as long as humans are human, we'll always want to compete and we'll always want to, play games and compete against each other. And so I think sports is something that in the world of AI and everything else that's changing, sports will continue to be something that grounds us as humanity and keeps us connected. And I think that's just fantastic as we think about what the future of sports holds for all of us, no matter where you sit on the equation.
Definitely. I love that. I'm a fan of the Coca-Cola brand. I'm a fan of the products. And after today, I'm a big fan of you. So Brad, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Sports Management Podcast.
My pleasure. And thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportmpodcast.